everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode, 52 weeks, 52 amazing authors. And I am joined today by Victoria Kyles, author of As My Heart Aligns. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. So thank you again for coming on this journey with us, 52 authors, 52 weeks. And before we get into your book, I want you to tell our listening, viewing audience about your background, how you got started.
Yeah, well, I'm actually a licensed professional counselor here in St. Louis, Missouri. I've worked with adolescents and their families for about 5-6 years. And I kind of just went into counseling. I don't want to say it's an accident, but originally I was just in love with psychology in high school. I had a teacher that was amazing. Her name was Miss Atkins. And I was like, that's interesting. I want to do that. And at the time, I didn't have any knowledge that psychology and counseling is very different. So I went in just thinking that, to learn about the mind is something that I felt like was always going to be exciting, something I wouldn't get tired of. And I also was kind of like that go-to person in my friend group. So they thought that psychology and counseling was the same as well. They're like, oh, well, you give great advice. So fast forward, I'm in my, master's program at UMSL getting my mental health counseling, clinical mental health counseling. And that's when I learned that psychology and counseling is very different. And I was excited to know that because, the idea that counseling is about giving advice is totally a myth. We do not give advice, but our, job and our mission is kind of help clients get unstuck. And so that's what we work on. And I just felt like, what could I do for the rest of my life for free if I had to? Not that you want to do things for free, but if I could, I always thought that helping people would be that route. And so that was my journey into counseling. And I love children and youth. And I feel like they're so resilient and they're the most honest creatures you'll ever meet. And so I love working with kids, primarily anywhere from ages 4 to like 30 is like the range that I've worked with. And so I just think it's important to have almost like a mentor, which is something I've never really had as a consistent mentor. So that's what kind of steered me in that path and kept me on that path. And I'm currently in a doctorate program to become a clinical psychologist because I feel that still more work to be done. And I need that extra knowledge too, because I do think that both are important, both counseling and psychology, to truly understand how change happens.
I love it. So it's funny you mentioned there's a difference between counseling, psychology, psychologists, psychiatrists, right? I think a lot of people think, kind of lump them all together, one and the same. But I also think that there's this stigma around meeting with a counselor or a therapist, like something is wrong with me, right? And sometimes people are embarrassed to really acknowledge that they need help. And it's so good that you are working with the younger generation. I know when I was I think I was 22, I had a baby who turned out to be special needs. So she's 32 today. She's deaf. She does not talk, but she's 32, right?
Right.
And so she does some of the things that a 32-year-old does, but then there's a lot of things that she doesn't do. And she's like around 5. And so I remember the day that I decided to take 30 Tylenol to end my life. I wish that I would have been educated about the need to talk to someone about it. I think I tried to tell my family. I don't think they were listening. And honestly, they're not trained, right, to listen and help you navigate through some of those complex life challenges. And once I experienced that situation, it was really a turning point for me. Because number one, I realized I wanted to live, right? I did not want to die. But I realized that I needed to be on earth for her, right? Because
Absolutely.
I have to take care of her for the rest of my life. God gave her to me for a reason. And so I need to be responsible for my gift. So the other thing, which is, I love how the stars align. The episode that's going to, that was last week, that will be the episode before yours, the author, Barbara J. Hunt, her book is about forgiveness made easy.
Wow.
And in her book, she talks about how forgiveness is not for the other people. Forgiveness is for you. So,
yes, that's something I've learned recently.
Well, you know what? You got to get her book. It is amazing. And I realized just from reading her book that I needed to forgive people who told me I wasn't going to be anything. And even today, when somebody tells me I can't do something, I am going to figure out a way to do it, because it's like, no, it's not in my vocabulary, right? It's like, okay, not right now, but like not no forever. So tell us a little bit about the journey for As My Heart Aligns.
Honestly, I think it's always been in the works. Like some of the poems in there have been written like seventh grade when I first discovered poetry, and it became like my main outlet. Because kind of like you, like I just kind of experienced this deep sadness, and I actually remember writing a suicide letter and had about 28 Tylenol, and I wrote a letter and I like to my parents. I left it in their room. I never really talked to them directly about it. I just kind of wrote the letter saying like, this is how many pills I've taken. This is the time. Who knows how many more I will take. And then I don't think I went through it. Remember sitting there with a knife crying and just confused about what was next. And I don't know, I just was so hurt and so sad. And I remember reading a poem my dad wrote because we would kind of communicate through poetry, and that made us close because my parents are my best friends now. But I haven't always talked to my parents. Obviously, as a teenager going through puberty, I was very distant and just wanted to rebel and do my own thing. So it was a poem I remember reading where I guess I don't know if my mom she doesn't remember ever seeing a note. I don't know if my dad got it and hid it, but he's always been kind of vigilant and hanging around. But the line he wrote was saying like, my mom wanted to take me to a shrink. And he remembers saying no, like she'll be okay. And so it's like, I wonder how my life would have changed had he not said no, had that been something that they supported at the time. Because like you said, it's so stigmatized, especially within the Black community, to go and talk about, your mental health, to even say, something is going on in the house that's bothering me. Because it was always what happens in my house stays in my house. Don't even tell your grandparents what's going on in my house. So I really didn't have that outlet outside of writing. So writing became that. And I think I kind of propelled forward after just making dumb decisions, rebelling, sneaking a boy in the house. And from there, I was in trouble for like 6 months. I was on punishment, and all I did was write because I couldn't do anything else. But I don't know what I was going through at the time outside of just having like encounters with death, but nobody telling me what death really was. So as a child, when you have your first experience with death, or you see a dead body and nobody explains it to you, you begin to make up fantasies about what death is, what happens. And so a lot of that kind of stunted my emotional maturity around grief because I didn't know how to deal with it. And so that's what a lot of my poems were about. My mom would joke and call them slit your wrist poems because she felt they were depressing. But to me, that's me telling you I'm depressed. Like I need something more. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I don't know why I don't want to live. But I never had I took it as I didn't have the courage to go through with it because a part of me wanted to live. I just didn't want to be in pain. And like to have that deep emotional pain, it's just a lot. So I remember going to college, surviving all of that, and then having a traumatic experience where I was sexually assaulted. And I think for that moment, I completely was different. I completely was different. That was during my undergrad year back in 2014 when that occurred. And so by the time I graduated from there, I remember being in a session with a client. I'm in my career at this point. I've completed my master's. I'm in a session with a client who's expressing her traumatic and chronic sexual assault kind of at the hands of her mother. And I remember freezing and didn't know why. I just checked out the session. And that was the first time I was like, wow, this happened to me. I don't know where I had placed it, where I had put this memory, but I just out of sight, out of mind, and just buried it. And I remember telling the field education director at the time, who helped me, a good friend of mine, Chantrell Carter. I remember telling her first. She was the first person I opened up to about what had happened. And from there, it's like I couldn't stop telling people. I couldn't tell people enough. And I regret telling certain people because it wasn't safe for me to do so. But it was like I had been holding it in for so many years. I had to get this out. And I knew that this was going to impact me as a clinician if I didn't. And so the journey began, in 2018. And it's been a constant journey. I think that it's never complete, as my friend Mel would say. And I'm constantly just trying to better myself. And the only way I can do that, I feel, is to tell my truth and to not be afraid of, the reactions from it.
Well, first up, let me just tell you, thank you for being so brave and sharing your story. The young people need you. I believe I'm slightly older than you at the young age of 50, but the young people need you. And what's so interesting, the first author for this year, Dr. Nisa Jenkins, her book is titled Speak Up, I Can't Hear You, The Voice of a Woman. And it's interesting how you talk about how you kind of like took that part of your life and buried it, but never resolved it. Right. And those things that you bury and don't resolve, they come up when you least expect it. And if you don't recognize that it's happening, you freeze, you shut down, or you lash out at someone and it had nothing to do with them.
Absolutely.
So your voice is so powerful, and getting help is powerful as well. It's not a sign of weakness.
Thank
I
you.
remember growing up, you talk about your, I think it was your father or mother used the word shrink, right?
Hmm.
Growing up, black church, just turn it over to Jesus and he gonna work it all right.
Yeah.
Okay, listen, prayer is important. Faith is important. But faith without work, going to a therapist, a
Hmm.
counselor is the other component of that, right?
Right.
And a lot of people miss the mark on that. And I think there will be so many people who are buried with all of that hurt and pain that they never had an opportunity to shed. And when you think about the news and the traumatic events that are happening that we're all watching play out on the news, what if those individuals would have had a safe space to
Hmm.
express how they were feeling, to get that help? I don't think we all would be, I call it, we're all dealing with vicarious trauma by watching this stuff play out on the news. Every time there's a mass shooting, I don't know about everybody else, I'm just gonna speak for me. When there's a mass shooting on the news and I'm watching it play out, it's hurtful, right? And I always think, like, what could have been done to help that person not get to that point where most of the time they're killing themselves, but taking other innocent lives with them. And it didn't have to
Hmm.
be that way. So what's your favorite part of your book? Is there a poem that you wrote that you want to read for us? What's something that,
Ooh.
or even just a sentence or something, because we don't want them. We want them to have the book, right?
Absolutely.
We need them to have the book. So we're not in this 30-minute growth session. We're not gonna spill all the tea, right?
Right.
But somebody that's listening to this right now, they're being set free so that they can go out and get the help that they need. But what's a word or two, a sentence that you would share with them that will help them turn that corner?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Because I feel like so much of the book was like a release. It's really kind of hard to hone in on different things because like each part of it, even though I'm not the person I was in some of those earlier poems, all of it was important in getting me to where I am today. And I think the poem Identity Crisis that starts with that question, how can I know myself when people have always told me who I am? That was like the most impactful and pivotal moment was me being asked that question and deciding like, man, I don't know who I am. I really don't know who I am. So for me, I went on this journey to try to answer that question. And to see myself on the other side of like, wow, I can confidently say I know who I am. I know who I want to become, and I know that I'm still a work in progress. And so I think the most important thing for people is to know that there is no end goal. There is not a specific point in your life where you're just going to stop growing. You're always going to evolve. You're always going to change if you allow it, because change is inevitable. And I think that to try to hinder that and to try to allow yourself to fit in different modes or circles or environments that no longer serve you doesn't benefit you at all. And it's scary. It definitely has been a scary process. And I'm always fearful of like, how many people will I lose on this journey? I think that identity crisis was about that, like to truly get to the person that I'm meant to be. I got to shed some layers, and I always use plant analogies like you got to prune the plant, otherwise you can't grow. And so for me, shedding that old version of myself, thinking that vulnerability was a weakness, being afraid to even say the word vulnerability, it really took shedding those layers in order for me to emerge and bloom. And that's what I think that everybody should take away from the book, if nothing else, is to be you and be fearless, because I almost didn't publish my book. I almost said, forget it. I had a point because in talking about my trauma for the first time, especially publicly, I had my dad edit my book because I believe he's one of the best poets ever. He's never published anything, but he definitely should. But I had never told my father what happened to me, and so that was hard in itself to have this moment where I'm telling him for the first time, like, hey, I want you to know before the world finds out, but this is what happened. And the reaction was totally what I didn't expect. And it caused me to shut down. And like for months, I didn't release my book. I put it off, even though it was complete, even though it was finished. I was just like, I felt like I had hurt him. And then I almost let him take away that word you used at the very beginning, power, from me in telling my story and my truth. And I was like, you know what? He's gonna feel how he's gonna feel. And I have to understand from a parent's perspective that, okay, I get it. However, that is not my story. What he feels does not define me. So it's only one piece of it. So if anybody takes anything away from this conversation, is to just be yourself truthfully and unapologetically. And even when things are hard or scary, do it anyway.
Ooh, So powerful, so powerful. So a couple of things came to mind for me when you were speaking. One of them was not everyone lives, survives to tell their story. So you sharing your journey with the world was not for you because you experienced it, right?
Right.
It's for those that are in the midst of experiencing it, letting them know that they aren't the only one that's experiencing the thing. We get so caught up in this thing is happening to me
Hmm.
when there are millions of other people the thing has happened to. And just knowing you're not alone is like this sigh of relief. When I published my book, Grow With Me, my mother read it, and my husband. I think those, my mother, my husband, my best friend, they were probably the only three that read it. And my mother actually said recently that she read it again because the first version that she read, some things had changed. And, her feedback, and she's, in her 70s, so, a very mature woman. She was like, it's a good book. It's an easy read. My grandfather, who is 103, still alive, he read
Wow.
the book and he said, I learned a lot of things about you that I did not know. Because I think we do such a good job of putting up this facade, like all is well, right? Like you put your
Yeah.
makeup on, you put your clothes on, and you allow others to believe that you're okay when you're not okay. And I remember just last year, 2023, I made a decision that I had to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that is what has allowed me to grow in a matter of months to the places that I should have been in the first place, but I
Right.
allowed fear to hold me back. So chapter 12 of my book is Faith Over Fear, because I realized in order to serve who I was destined to serve, I needed to tell my story, right? A lot
Hmm.
of people hold in those stories, because of they're embarrassed. But once I like to say, delivered this baby of this new version of myself, I have had this peace that you can't even pay for, because it's such a place of peace that I lay down every night and the insomnia is gone, right? Just the things that were keeping me up at night. Now, of course, I got a little menopause that wakes me up every now and then. Carry my fan with me everywhere. Maybe my fan, maybe my microphone. But once I started that journey, my own personal journey, it was life changing. And so I want to say to others, it's never too late. My friend Desmond Smith has this slogan, never too late, right? It's never too late to go on this journey so that your heart can align, because I know that things that you hold in can impact your physical health as
Absolutely.
well as your mental health.
I totally agree. I recently just had an experience, and I was on winter break where I just decided I'm tired. I'm physically tired. I'm mentally tired. I need a break. And there were a lot of different things pulling and pushing me that I had to endure. Then I just I feel like I'm regressing. I feel like people are trying to silence me. I feel like I can't use my voice again. And it impacted my health to the point where I thought I was going to have gallbladder surgery. I didn't know what was going on. And my therapist, he's amazing. He's just telling me like, are you sure this isn't depression? Are you sure this is your gallbladder? Because it sounds to me like you didn't do any of the things that you're supposed to do. You didn't use your skills. You didn't reach out for support. You chose to struggle when you didn't have to. But I had to ask myself, why did I put myself back in that position knowing how hard I worked to get out of it? And for me, it was simply him confronting that and me saying, you know what? It's time to get back on track. Because like you said, when I have things to do, I have that structure. I can put the mask on. I can keep going. But for that moment, behind those closed doors, which is the next book that I'll be writing, I was able to just hide and go back to a version of myself that I felt just needed nurturing at that time. And I told myself I don't want to go back to that place that I've been, so I got to keep pushing forward.
Oh, I love it. I've recently experienced a period of my life, and because I'm in the medical field, I use this term with someone else who knew what I was talking about. But there's this procedure or process called ECMO. It's extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, and it's used when a patient is really ill, and they kind of put the heart and lungs on this machine when they can't do any other measures, and it allows the body to rest so it can heal. So I
Hmm.
recently had to put myself on ECMO and get rid of all of the outside noise so that I could get that rest and get that peace that you need. And it wasn't for them, it was for me, because sometimes people lash out at you or say things to you or do things
Mhm.
to you, and you think, man, what did I do to them? It ain't got nothing to do with you. It's
Right.
them. And you have to be mature enough, emotionally intelligent enough to recognize, that's you. And I'm not going
Right.
to take on your problems.
Yeah, gotta give the baggage back.
Yes, absolutely. I do not have real estate for everybody else's stuff. I only got real estate for my stuff.
That's real. That is honest. I told a friend of mine that recently, like, I can help you carry the luggage, but at the end, when we get to the destination, you got to take it with you. Now, I can't keep it. I don't have the emotional capacity to keep it, so I won't.
So you mentioned this word, emotional capacity. So some people don't know what that means. Tell them what that means.
Well, for me, emotional capacity, it really is about checking in with the self, seeing how much you can handle. Because a lot of times, we talk about pouring into other people's cups. And if your cup isn't already abundantly overflowing and you continue to pour, your cup is going to be empty, and it's not even about the glass half full, half empty analogy. It's simply about, if you don't have it to give, don't. And it's okay to be selfish sometimes and just be in tune with, okay, I don't have all this to give, but this is what I can give. So emotional capacity is simply setting a boundary that I can be here to support you in this way, but outside of this, I can't do anymore. And you just have to be acknowledged about checking your own temperature and seeing if you have that to give. Because a lot of times I would always put other people before me, not knowing that was rooted in codependency, and I would have nothing left for myself, which would look like very much like that winter break, just sleeping, not doing anything because I've given so much that I forgot to give to me. So now emotional capacity for me simply means putting myself as a priority on my list, not at the bottom, but at the top. And then moving forward and helping others when and if I can.
Because you can't help everybody else if you don't help yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people have not come to that realization. They're so busy pleasing others. And I'm like, I'm a giver, but I realize that the business of serving myself has to be the number one priority, point blank, period, if I want to be sustain
Right.
what I'm trying to do. It's not sustainable if I'm pouring into everybody else, but I don't pour into myself first.
Yep, it's like they tell you, put your oxygen mask on first, because if
Absolutely.
you die, who can you help? So yeah, I definitely
Listen,
had to do that.
I love how you just broke that down, because some people don't understand it. For those of you who have never been on a plane, let me just demonstrate. We're in our seats and we start to experience the turbulence. I fly out every week, so I know about that turbulence. And this has never happened to me. But in the case of an emergency, oxygen masks will fall from the compartment. You see, I got the script down pat, right? They'll fall from the compartment.
Yes.
And they tell you, put yours on first so that you can start being protected. And then anyone else that you need to help, you help them second. Put you first. That's hard for some people because they are nurturers. That's just in their personality. But there is a point that you get to where you're helping everyone else and you lose yourself in the process.
Oh yeah, it's that compassion fatigue. You get burnt out. Kind of like you said, that vicarious trauma is real. So it's like when you're taking on so many other things, you have to decide, when am I going to release this? Who can I give this to hold? And that's where, therapy comes into place for me, is having that outlet when I don't want to put that onto my friends or my loved ones. Because, the saying, if you don't heal what hurt you, you'll bleed on who didn't cut you. And I don't want to be bleeding on people. Blood is already, iffy in the world anyway. So it's like, who wants to be bled on if they don't deserve it? So like you were talking about other people putting their things onto people because they don't have that self-awareness. I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution. So if nothing else, I try to always look inward first before I seek anything outward, because I feel like we have the answers that we need within inside of us. So
oh yeah, that power inside of you is the power. I think, I do a lot of research on resilience, and resilience is this muscle that you got to keep building, but you gotta flex the muscle, right?
Right.
And a lot of people, I don't think they realize how powerful they are because they've allowed others to define them.
Absolutely.
I remember talking to a young woman who was kind of like lost as a wife. She got married very early. She wasn't really comfortable and confident who she was as a woman. And so now she's married, wife, mother, and she never took the time to figure out who she was. And she had a lot of vicarious trauma, childhood abuse, and all of that. And so she didn't resolve it and basically took all them bags with her into the marriage, into motherhood, which now she's trying to reverse. And it can be reversed once you acknowledge that, yeah, I didn't really drop that off in the garbage and let it burn up.
Exactly. And it can get very, very I guess scary or fearful, because once you start to change and people are not ready, they get used to that old version of you. They're like, who is this? You acting funny, you switching up. And it's like, no,
Sips
you
tea.
yeah. It's like, this is who I should have been a long time ago. And it's like, either you get on board or you got to get out the way. So
And you know what? We should, as we continue to grow, attract those that are supposed to be in our space and repel those that shouldn't. And we should be able to see them coming and go the other way.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell our listening, viewing audience how they can get a copy of your book, As My Heart Aligns.
They can go to the website, tbutherapy.square.site with a backslash at the end. I also am on Instagram at Trust Between Us, where the link should be in the bio. And that is my private practice, currently not accepting clients, but I do, advertise things from time to time. And I like to support other businesses as well on that page. So I'm not active on social media as much these days, but I definitely will be paying attention to it more in the upcoming future, just as I try to grow my business moving forward.
I love it. So what's in store for the future? So you got another book you're working on. I too am working on another book.
Nice.
And my first book was more like yours, where it was a lot about me growing. But this next book is where I'm going to help others focus on their growth with different chapters that address different areas of our life, all the different luggage that we're carrying. And since I love to travel, I'm
Nice.
always buying new luggage, because you always got to have a bag packed, passport ready. But
Absolutely.
what does the future hold for you?
Dr.
Other than
Kyle's is on
school,
the way. Yes.
Dr. Kyle's, I love it.
That's the long, 5 years, 4 years, from now, that should be the end goal. But yeah, what's moving forward, I just want to become a clinician. I honestly want to do a lot more community outreach with the homeless population within my city and county. That's something I've always been passionate about. And I would just like to continue that journey. And then also, like I said, working on that second book, Behind Closed Doors, and launching that, which will be just about speaking up and speaking out and not being silenced, and just talking about the things that people typically probably wouldn't, the taboo topics and the things that the secrets of the Black families that are hidden. I just want to put it out in the air and just be unapologetic about it. So that's what people can expect. People gonna be mad, but yeah.
Airing that dirty laundry. But you know what? Dirty laundry stinks.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to come on and clean up your house so you
Yes.
can move forward.
Yeah, spring is coming, so it's a time for renewal, cleaning, and just allowing new things to flow. So I'm waiting for my blessings to continue to come.
Absolutely. And you got to plant those seeds first, right? So you can
Absolutely.
reap that harvest. You got to plant the seeds. That's the key.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing is, you plant the seed in this season, but you may not see the growth happen for another season or two, but don't lose sight on your vision, right? You have to keep that vision at the forefront of your mind, because that's when it really starts to unfold.
Yeah, I always say, when the plan changes, you change the plan, not the goal. So just because the first plan doesn't work out doesn't mean the second one or the third. And it's just that consistency and that discipline to truly get to where you want to be. So those are some things I'm focusing on for this year, is just being patient and learning to surrender control.
You know what? That's a good place to end. This has been an amazing conversation. Congratulations on your book. Congratulations on becoming one of the 10% in the doctor crew, because it's definitely something that will test your patience, your willpower. I remember having some days where I was crying and crying and crying, thinking I wasn't going to be able to do it, but I just kept fighting.
Yeah.
But also, I had a community, right? I had folks that were around me that were like, I'm not going to become a doctor or anything, but I'm cheering you on in this journey. And so that really helped me get over the hump. And for me, it took more than 4 years. I started in 2004. 2008, I collected my data. So, I should have been finished the next year, but it wasn't until 2013 that I actually finished. Supposedly ran out of financial aid money. Just all of these barriers started to try to come and attack me. And I was just like, oh no, I am going to finish this journey. And I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, everyone. This is Dr. Lisa L. Campbell, the Growth Motivator, with another episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. Until next time. Thank you.